I'm here today as I guess I was kind of the guinea pig in a practical way for this project. One of the kind of things I suppose we were looking at doing was using a more imaginative approach, I suppose, to string operations. They're not always the most exciting thing. So I think this is a really nice way of getting kids involved. Firstly, I'd like to say they were a brilliant resource. The programming is pitched really well. They're nice solutions. They can be easily adapted. I'll give you a couple of exams for my own class currently around this too in a couple of minutes. So I've done worksheets 1 and 2 with both my classes and worksheet 3 with my sixth years. I've used it as a revision with my sixth years, and I'm sure after Owen's explanation, you can see the value of that. There really is an absolute massive amount of the Python needed in these sheets alone. I also used the worksheet as a starting point for ALT 2 with my fifth years, and that was extremely enlightening to say the least. We wouldn't have time to run through every part of the PowerPoints and the assessments, so I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of the ones linked with worksheet 2 on word frequencies. So this is the PowerPoint for worksheet 2, which is one has gone through. It starts with one of Maria's nice images. The first thing you're going to do here is it starts essentially with a quick reminder of the basic bits that the kids need to have at the start. So import your libraries, point your book into the directory, read the book in. So I would start them fairly slow on that, give them a couple of minutes to get each section in and preferentially code it themselves, remind them of the previous program from worksheet 1. For the less confident students, I would then leave this up for a minute or two to allow them to catch up. Get them to run it at this point, ask them how many lines they should have. It's over 700,000, as Owen showed us. This allows you to keep everybody kind of on the same page as you're working through it. The next task is to convert it to lowercase. I have included a number of points which you'll see throughout this where I remind them to use the Python reference sheet. So those of you who are teachers will be extremely familiar with the Python reference sheet. It's always good to remind the kids to go back to this constantly because it's what they'd actually have in the exam. And it really contains the most important things they need to learn from this. It's a good habit as well. And there can be a discussion here because there's actually a few ways of doing this. But again, you hope that they find the one that's on the Python reference sheet. Owen did a pretty good job of explaining regular expressions, definitely better than I would have done. But the next part of the code is going to be one of those things. At this point, for my fifth years, I wouldn't explain regular expressions necessarily. For my sixth years, I did. At that point, they know enough Python to actually be able to engage with something like that. And I'll definitely use that regex thing that Owen just showed us. Again, it's really about judging the pace of your own class and how much time you have. Regular expressions are a little bit tricky at the start. So I would definitely be more inclined to do that with a sixth year class than a fifth year. So the next thing we're looking for is essentially an understanding of frequency. You're giving them time to research this, give them a little bit of time to actually think of different ways of doing this. And you can give them 5 or 10 minutes to research it themselves with a partner. Again, this is just about getting that group work running and that teamwork running within the class, because of the emphasis in the computer science course on that. Again, you're looking at this. There's multiple ways of doing this. A few of my sixth years did this quite differently. The beauty of it, you're working off the same text. So you're all initially doing this with Pride and Prejudice. That means that you can all actually check that you all get the same 20 most common words at the end, regardless of how they actually approach this. So it's a really nice way to actually check, even though people are doing it in a different way, that they're getting the same outcome. There can be a lot of learning in that. The next thing is you're looking for them to, as Owen showed us, get simple words like at, I, at, to, she, they. And again, to notice that these are not particularly useful in understanding the text. So you start by removing the small words. Again, I'd really leave this. Most kids will actually get to the end of this if you give them a bit of time. Again, back to the Python reference sheet. As a teacher, you're constantly referring back to that. And again, all of this would be standard from the Python reference sheet. They really should be able to access this. Again, if you have students who are really struggling, leave this up at the end. They might have got halfway through, but not got to the end. Then we have the list of stop words. At this point, really, because of the way the sheets are set up, they will actually completely understand why they need these stop words. I think if you gave them to them at the start, they wouldn't understand why these are so important. But essentially what you're saying to them is, if you run this on any book in the English language, you're essentially going to get 20 words off this in some order. So without the stop words, you wouldn't even be able to identify which book you're dealing with. So this is quite interesting, and I think it gives the kids a good understanding of why stop words are so important. If they choose their own text later on, which they will if they're doing the L2, the stop words can be just a fantastic place to learn about linguistics and Unicode. I had students coding this in Zulu, in Yoruba, in Czech, Ukrainian, like Turkish. And again, all of those have multiple symbols and multiple parts of their language. So it's a really good place to introduce the idea of Unicode versus ASCII, and why one is better than the other. Not that you're meant to say that, but that's true. But I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. So how can we delete stop words from our list? Again, this is straight off the Python reference sheet. What you're looking for here is the syntax is absolutely spot on. It's exactly as it appears on the reference sheet. This could be quite a quick thing. The kids will understand how to do it. And again, it allows them to become proficient with those operators and how you put a list into those operators in the name of the list. It's actually a lovely little bit of coding for them. And again, this is nice. They should be able to do this. A list of words might not be the best way to represent this. So again, Ona showed you Matplotlib. Matplotlib is fantastic. The kids absolutely love it. They'd sit there for the whole class and just do that if you let them. But the focus here is obviously on trying to build knowledge. They will have already done worksheet 1, and there's a PowerPoint for that. So what you're trying to encourage here is, what did we use in the last worksheet? You know, you're going to go back and you're going to look at Matplotlib, one of your libraries. And the focus on here is really on building knowledge. They will have used Matplotlib. This is a reminder and then extension. They love playing around with it, so give them a couple of little tasks just to build their knowledge around it. So changing it between bar charts, pie charts, you know, histograms, whatever they like. Then discussing exactly how that how each graph might be the best or worst way to represent that data. Is the font big enough? Is the layout good? There's lots of learning here if you want it. The bonus tasks, again, you're comparing texts or 3 texts that you've downloaded. Again, at this point, if students are finished, and we all know from doing computer science, you're always going to have a couple in your class that are just miles ahead. With those kids, again, I would be perfectly happy to say, go to Project Gutenberg, download some books, analyze them, see what you can come up with. So after doing this with my 5th years, we then took the code and they used it as their L2. We're currently working on it at the moment. So they're blending their learning from worksheets 1 and 2, and they're choosing a text or a couple of texts of their own, depending on their ability. We have a number of new students in my 5th year class, and I actually only have 2 students for whom the English is their first language. So by choosing text in their primary language, we could extend the Python code by using Unicode to include stop words of any language with any symbology. This was absolutely, it was just fascinating. We ended up going through a huge amount of different languages and the way they're constructed and what kind of stop words you get. The word doesn't exist in Russian. I learned about the Italian influence on language in Somalia. This was really deep learning. And for kids that are coming from backgrounds like that, you don't necessarily always want to ask personal questions. So this is a really nice way of getting to know the kids without it being a pressured environment. They also ended up doing this as a cross-curricular project with their English teacher. So as part of the English course, they have to write about why they would choose a book. So the introduction actually to their L2 is being done in English class, where they're discussing the reasons they picked a particular book, then using that book with modified versions of this code to analyze them. It was a lovely segue again into the ASCII versus Unicode. Certainly, I think if you speak Russian or Czech or Zulu, you understand the value of Unicode versus ASCII. So it was really, really rich learning here. I would really strongly recommend this as a project for the 5th years. I think they really got an understanding of how Python can be used to just ask really interesting questions. The last part I'm just going to really quickly run through is the assessments. There are 2 assessments for worksheet 2 currently up on the website. Again, nice images from Maria. So I'll give a really quick outline of these. So I've got one on, again, using the nice images. So essentially, these are core concepts being reinforced: revision of data types, Unicode, list operations, understanding of modifying code. They have a mix of long and multiple choice questions. The multiple choice questions will automatically correct, which is a dream as a teacher. And the correct answers will be visible to the students once they submit. I set these as homework while we're working through worksheets. I also coach in the school, so occasionally I'm not in a class. These assessments are extremely good for keeping kids on target and assessing that the learning that you hope to happen in class has actually happened. You can see there's multiple different kind of aspects of the code that have been pulled out. There are questions on blocks of code, there are individual kind of symbols, anything really you can add here. These are in if you're not familiar with Microsoft Forms, sorry, you duplicate the code into your own account and you can add your own questions to this based on your experience in your class with your students or what you would particularly like your students to get from this. They're editable. So feel free to add your own bits and pieces. And at the end, you get this nice synopsis. So you're really clear on what the kids understand and what they don't understand. This actually really allows you to adapt the next class that you're teaching them quite quickly. So that was kind of the main thing that I wanted to run through, was the kind of application of it in class. I love using these worksheets, and the L2 has actually been extremely interesting for me. I've had to solve lots of problems to do with the way Python recognizes different languages and symbols. So I think there's real depth of learning in this, and the kids have been really excited to go off themselves, I suppose, and for it to be personal to their own experience of the world. Just really deep learning. If anybody has any questions about using it in the classroom, they can pop into the chat.